Pro tip: when your grand plan involves the phrase municipal storm drain, you might want to workshop it a bit. Especially if your arch nemesis is a 50-something with a visor and a vendetta against joy. This wasn't my finest hour, or my driest. I was sitting in a bright red inflatable rescue boat, which was, I grudgingly admitted, far more comfortable than my own slightly too small orange kayak, currently wedged somewhere in a subterranean pipe. Water dripped from my hair onto a silver foil blanket, making crinkling noises that seemed to mock my predicament. Across from me, a firefighter with a mustache that could probably put out small fires by itself stared straight ahead, radiating an aura of "seen it all," still shaking my head. He hadn't asked a single question, and honestly, I appreciated that. There really wasn't a concise, dignified answer to, "Why are you in a storm drain?" In the distance, on the manicured bank of the retention pond that was supposed to be my personal oasis, Brenda from the HOA was filming me with her phone. Her triumphant smirk was visible even from this distance, an unholy beacon of vindication. She probably had a pre-written press release for the HOA newsletter. Protagonist Alex Miller, menace to property values, friend to mild hypothermia. It all started, as most suburban tragedies do, with a perfectly good kayak and a newly elected HOA president. A month ago, my life was, by suburban standards, pretty damn idyllic. My house, a tastefully neutral beige, sat on a cul-de-sac that genuinely culled sacks of stress from my daily existence. My job, a remote gig in web design, meant my commute was from the coffee maker to my spare bedroom. My biggest daily challenge was usually deciding which artisanal oat milk to put in my latte. Life was good, calm, predictable. And then there was the lake. Not a sprawling, majestic body of water, but a perfectly respectable, man-made retention pond that served as the shimmering centerpiece of our little slice of suburban paradise. It was ringed by walking paths, dotted with benches, and home to a surprising variety of waterfowl. Geese, ducks, the occasional stoic heron, a regular avian UN meeting. But for me, the lake was primarily for one thing: kayaking. Every morning, just as the sun was thinking about cracking the horizon, I'd slip out of my back door, grab my bright orange single-person kayak from its wall mounts in the garage, and head out. My personal launch point wasn't the designated asphalt-covered boat ramp that was a solid half-mile trek through winding sidewalks and past precisely 27 perfectly trimmed azalea bushes. Oh no, I had a shortcut. A delightful, perfectly harmless life hack. About 100 feet from my back gate, the grassy slope that led down to the lake met a concrete spillway. It was designed to manage overflow, a wide, gently sloped channel that ended in a smooth drop into the water. It was also, crucially, the perfect width for my kayak. A few steps, a gentle slide, and thwup, I was in the water, paddling away into the sunrise. No care, no fuss, no dragging the kayak over gravel. Just pure, unadulterated pre-work bliss. I'd paddle for an hour, sometimes two, watching the sun paint the sky in hues that made me question why I spent so much time staring at CSS code. The quiet hum of the suburban morning, the gentle ripple of the water, the occasional indignant squawk of a goose I'd accidentally startled. It was my meditation, my sanity keeper. I even had a favorite cove, tucked away behind a cluster of weeping willows, where the water was especially still, and the early morning mist clung like a shy ghost. On my way back, I'd usually pass George, my elderly neighbor, watering his prize-winning hydrangeas. George was a man of quiet routines and loud Hawaiian shirts. He'd always give a slow, knowing wave as I glided back into my Spillway docking station. "Another beautiful morning on the water, Alex?" he'd call out, his voice raspy but warm. "The best, George," I'd reply, effortlessly pulling my kayak out of the water, giving it a quick wipe, and then hauling it back up the gentle slope. George got it. A little splash of nature to offset the soul-crushing beige of subdivision life. We were beige brethren, connected by a shared appreciation for simple pleasures and, in my case, clever shortcuts. This was my paradise. This was my routine. And then the new HOA president arrived, armed with a clipboard and an unshakable belief in the sanctity of bylaws. My paradise, it turned out, was about to be officially revoked. The first sign of impending doom wasn't a meteor shower or a sudden plague of locusts. It was a woman in a perfectly ironed salmon-pink polo shirt, standing sentinel by my beloved Spillway access point. I was just returning from my morning paddle, feeling that post-kayak glow, the one that makes you believe you can conquer spreadsheets and tricky JavaScript alike. "Good morning," I chirped, pulling my kayak onto the concrete, still half expecting George's cheerful wave. Instead, I got a stare that could curdle milk. She was mid-50s, with a severe blonde bob haircut that looked like it had been styled with a protractor, and a pair of sensible, chunky walking shoes that probably cost more than my kayak. In her hand, clutched like a holy relic, was a clipboard. A clipboard, I would soon learn, was the HOA president's equivalent of a medieval knight's sword, both for defense and for smiting the unrighteous. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she stated, her voice having the pleasant yet utterly unyielding timbre of a passive-aggressive answering machine message. She knew my name. This was not a good sign. "I'm Brenda Finch, the new HOA president." "Oh, hi, Brenda," I said, trying to summon a neighborly smile that felt forced and probably looked terrifying. "Nice to meet you. Just finishing up my morning paddle." I gestured vaguely towards the lake, as if to imply, "See? Harmless water fun." Brenda, however, was not interested in harmless water fun. Her eyes, which were the exact color of a freshly polished golf ball, scanned my kayak, then the spillway, then me, as if performing a mental audit of my entire existence. "Yes, I see that. And this, Mr. Miller," she gestured with her clipboard towards the concrete spillway, "is exactly what we need to address." My post-kayak glow instantly evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. "Address? What do you mean, address?" She squared her shoulders, adopting what I would soon come to know as her official rules enforcement stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, chin slightly elevated, eyes narrowed. It was less human, more an animatronic exhibit from the Hall of Suburban Authority Figures. "As per the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, Section 14, subsection C," she recited, as if reading from a sacred scroll. "All water access must be confined to the designated boat ramp. This," she waved her clipboard at the spillway again, this time with a hint of disdain, "is unauthorized use of common property, and a major insurance liability." I blinked. "The boat ramp? That's half a mile away. I'd have to put the kayak on my car and drive it over. This is right here. It's been like this for years. Everyone uses it." Brenda's lips thinned. "Mr. Miller, I understand your preference for convenience. However, convenience does not supersede community regulations. The previous board may have allowed certain laxities, but my administration is committed to upholding the standards that protect our property values." She paused, then added with a note of pure, unadulterated triumph, "Your vessel is also not a pre-approved color. Please see the color palette addendum for acceptable external recreational equipment hues." I stared at my bright orange kayak, which had always struck me as a cheerful, highly visible, and perfectly functional piece of equipment. Now, apparently, it was an aesthetic affront to the entire community. A color palette addendum for kayaks? "Safety and visual cohesion are paramount, Mr. Miller," she declared, as if she'd just delivered a profound philosophical truth. Then, with a flourish that was both dramatic and utterly demoralizing, she produced a pre-printed violation notice from her clipboard, complete with a little perforated tear-off section. It was pristine, fresh, probably still smelled of printer ink. She slapped it onto the hull of my innocent, non-compliant orange kayak. This is a formal warning. Future violations will result in fines, a substantial fine. She held my gaze, daring me to challenge her. My mind raced, trying to find a loophole, a counter-argument, anything. But her impenetrable bureaucratic wall was already up. This wasn't a conversation. It was a unilateral declaration of war on my morning routine. And just like that, my idyllic suburban paradise had its first and most formidable dragon. A dragon in a salmon-pink polo, armed with a clipboard and a terrifying dedication to bylaws. My first instinct was to laugh. My second was to print out the HOA bylaws, highlight every clause remotely related to water access, and then present a meticulously footnoted, PowerPoint-backed argument for the continued, unimpeded use of the spillway. My third, and ultimately most regrettable, instinct was to actually do that. The monthly HOA meeting was held in the stuffy, overly air-conditioned community center clubhouse. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale coffee. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, facing a long table where Brenda sat, flanked by two other board members. Mrs. Henderson, a sweet-faced woman who always looked perpetually confused, and Mr. Peterson, who appeared to be asleep with his eyes open. George was there, sitting in the back, giving me a sympathetic nod. I had spent 2 evenings preparing. I had photos of kids safely using the spillway, pre-Brenda era, of course. I had a hastily gathered petition with about 10 signatures, mostly George and some other folks who enjoyed the lake. I had even prepared a little speech, carefully worded to sound reasonable and community-minded, rather than like a man on the verge of losing his mind over a kayak launch. "Good evening, everyone," I began, trying to project calm confidence as I stood before the board. Brenda sat perfectly still, hands clasped, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. It was the look of a predator watching a particularly juicy, yet hopelessly naive gazelle approach. "I'd like to address the recent closure of the spillway access point," I continued, gesturing towards the map I'd printed showing my house, the lake, and the offending access point. For years, residents have safely and conveniently used this natural launch point for kayaks, paddleboards, and even just for a quick dip on a hot day. It's an amenity that adds to the quality of life here. Mrs. Henderson gave a small, encouraging nod. Mr. Peterson continued his valiant fight against consciousness. Brenda remained an unmoving, pink-poloed statue of defiance. "I've spoken to several neighbors," I pressed on, "and there's a clear desire to see this access restored. It's safe, it's convenient, and nobody has ever had a problem with it. In fact, its closure creates more inconvenience, forcing residents to use the main boat ramp, which is often crowded and requires vehicle transport for even small vessels." I held up my petition. "I have signatures here showing community support for maintaining the spillway access." Brenda finally spoke, her voice cutting through the polite murmurs from the audience like a freshly sharpened letter opener. "Thank you, Mr. Miller, for your spirited presentation. However, as I explained to you previously, and as stated in the updated addendum to the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, Section 14, subsection C.1, all informal water access points not designated as a primary recreational facility are to be secured and rendered inaccessible to mitigate insurance liability and maintain aesthetic uniformity." She paused, as if expecting applause for her flawless recitation. She didn't get any. "Anecdotal evidence is not data," she continued, her gaze sweeping over the room, daring anyone to challenge her. While you may find the spillway convenient, our insurance underwriter has flagged unfenced, ungraded water access points as a high-risk exposure for the association. Furthermore, the presence of unauthorized vessels, particularly those not adhering to the approved color palette, detracts from the overall visual harmony of our lakefront. She actually managed to make visual harmony sound like a federal mandate. "But it's been fine for years," I blurted, my carefully constructed calm beginning to fray. "Past oversights do not set present precedents, Mr. Miller," Brenda retorted, a triumphant gleam in her eye. "The motion on the floor, proposed by myself and seconded by Mr. Peterson, is to approve the expenditure for the installation of a decorative, yet formidable, wrought iron fence along the entire length of the spillway, effectively securing it against further unauthorized use." Mr. Peterson, startled by his name, gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Mrs. Henderson looked from me to Brenda, her brow furrowed with distress. A few other residents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Nobody wanted to cross Brenda. She had an aura of pure, unadulterated, bureaucratic aggression. "All in favor?" Brenda asked, looking expectantly around the room. A few hands timidly went up. Then, like dominoes, more followed. Everyone just wanted to go home. Everyone just wanted this meeting and Brenda's iron-fisted rule to be over. My heart sank. My petition, my photos, my carefully crafted arguments, they were all useless. My motion was crushed. My spillway access, once a haven of peace, was now officially slated for an ironclad prison sentence. I walked out of that meeting feeling defeated, humiliated, and utterly infuriated. The war had just begun, and I had clearly lost the first battle. But I wasn't about to give up. Not yet. 2 days later, the anger had transmuted into a simmering, deeply unproductive resentment. My kayak sat forlornly in the garage, a bright orange monument to my vanished morning ritual. I'd tried the main boat ramp once. It involved strapping the kayak to the roof of my car, navigating through a maze of minivans and SUVs, then waiting in line behind a guy trying to launch a full-sized fishing boat with the maneuverability of a drunken elephant. The whole thing took 45 minutes, left me sweaty and stressed, and completely obliterated any sense of pre-work serenity. It was the antithesis of my spillway zen. I was pacing around my garage, glaring at my now landlocked kayak, when my phone buzzed. It was Dave, my best friend from college, now a corporate drone in Atlanta. He was the kind of guy who believed in logic and reason, two concepts that had utterly abandoned me in my current predicament. "Hey man, what's up? You sound agitated." "Agitated?" I scoffed, kicking gently at a rogue pebble. "Dave, I am beyond agitated. I am a finely tuned instrument of suburban rage. Brenda from the HOA just steamrolled my entire argument, and now they're putting up a fence around the spillway. A wrought iron fence." Dave let out a low whistle. "A wrought iron fence? That's next level. I thought your HOA was just about making sure everyone's grass was exactly 3 inches high." "No, Dave. Brenda's vision is grander. It's about total control, aesthetic fascism. She even critiqued my kayak's color. My kayak! It's orange, Dave. Like safety orange. Not detracts from visual harmony orange." Dave chuckled. "Okay, that's pretty wild, but dude, come on. Just use the boat ramp. Is this really the hill you want to die on?" I stopped pacing. "It's the principle of the thing, man. It's about freedom. It's about convenient water access. It's about not letting a tyrannical HOA president dictate the very color of my personal recreation." "You sound like a revolutionary fighting for his right to a slightly shorter walk to the lake," Dave said, clearly amused. "Look, I get it. Bureaucracy sucks. But sometimes you gotta pick your battles. Just sell the house and move somewhere with actual anarchy, like Florida. I'm not selling the house, I retorted, my voice rising. I like my house. I like my cul-de-sac. I like George. I just don't like being told what to do by a woman who probably dreams in Helvetica font. So, what's the plan then, Che Guevara? Dave asked, the amusement clear in his voice. I'm going to find a solution, I declared, my eyes drifting from the hated fence line visible through my garage window to the large, grated storm drain opening a few feet away from it. It was a dark, square opening, covered by a heavy iron grate, barely noticeable unless you were actively looking for it. It fed into the storm drain system that snaked beneath our neat little suburb, eventually emptying into the retention pond on the far side. A terrible, beautiful idea began to form in my mind. A better, more elegant solution, one that doesn't involve driving or listening to Brenda's lectures about property values. Dave was silent for a moment. Alex, I know that tone. That's your I'm about to do something incredibly stupid but technically brilliant tone. It's the I'm about to reclaim my peace and quiet tone, I corrected him, feeling a surge of defiant energy. Don't worry about it. Just know that justice in some form will be served. Just don't call me when you end up on the evening news for unauthorized subterranean aquatic exploration, Dave muttered, clearly not convinced. No promises, I said, a mischievous grin spreading across my face. I hung up, ignoring his exasperated groan. My eyes returned to the storm drain. It was an escape route, a secret passage, a private VIP entrance to the lake that Brenda, in all her clipboard-wielding glory, had almost certainly overlooked. This was it. This was my new battlefield. Dave's warning about unauthorized subterranean aquatic exploration had actually, perversely, fueled my resolve. The man just didn't understand the complex mind of a suburban rebel. This wasn't about being stupid. This was about strategic rerouting. If the HOA wanted to play hardball with wrought iron, I'd simply go subterranean. Like a very determined, slightly damp gopher with a kayak, my research and development phase began immediately, transforming my home office into a frantic intelligence hub. Forget web design. This was real engineering. My screen filled with municipal drainage maps, pulled from various obscure county websites. These maps, I told myself, were clear. This wasn't just a random drain. It was a sophisticated, if unglamorous, network. My drain, the one just outside my garage, fed directly into a main collector pipe that, after a few gentle curves, emptied into the far side of the retention pond. It's basically a concrete water slide, I muttered to myself, zooming in on a particularly thick blue line on the digital map. What could possibly go wrong? It was an underground river, designed by the city, free for the taking. Brenda wasn't stopping me from using the lake. She was just forcing me to be more creative, more resourceful. I measured the drain opening outside my garage, 24 inches by 36 inches. My kayak, thankfully, was a sleek 22 inches wide, a tight fit but doable. I'd just have to be careful with my paddle. Or maybe I could propel myself with my hands. Minor details. The overall concept was brilliant. I then delved into the rabbit hole of YouTube. Urban exploring storm drains, kayaking in culverts, underground water routes. My search history was becoming increasingly suspicious. I watched videos of adrenaline junkies navigating surprisingly clean, well-lit concrete tunnels. I ignored the ones showing murky, rat-infested sewers or floodwaters raging through pipes. Those were for other storm drains. Mine was special. Mine was pristine, probably. My internal monologue was a constant stream of flawed logic and self-assurance. The gradient is gentle, I'd tell myself, staring at a cross-section diagram that probably didn't apply to my specific pipe. It's designed for water flow. which means it's designed for objects that float, like kayaks. It's practically inviting me. The fact that these objects that float were usually rainwater, leaves, and the occasional lost tennis ball completely escaped me. I started a list of supplies. This was serious business, after all. Headlamp. Crucial for visibility. A good bright one. Not one of those flimsy camping ones. This was for subterranean navigation. Waterproof phone case. For selfies from the lake, obviously. And for emergencies, I grudgingly added, though I couldn't imagine what kind of emergency. A slow leak? A rogue frog? Rope. Just in case. In case of what? I didn't exactly know, but it felt responsible. Like a good explorer, I should always have a rope. Knee pads. The thought of scraping my knees on rough concrete wasn't appealing. Comfort and safety, people. Snacks, granola bar, because even subterranean explorers get peckish. Water bottle. Hydration is key, even underground. Watch. To time my triumphant emergence. I estimated 8 to 10 minutes. Max. I meticulously checked the weather forecast. No rain for the next 72 hours. Perfect. I didn't want to be caught in a flash flood. My engineering degree was in web development, not hydrology. This operation required precision. My plan crystallized. A stealth entry under the cover of darkness. I'd pry open the grate, slide the kayak in, then myself, and then simply float to freedom. Brenda would patrol her new fence, smug in her victory, completely unaware that I was already bypassing her petty tyranny, flowing beneath her very feet. This wasn't just kayaking. It was an act of civil disobedience, a highly personal, slightly damp, and utterly brilliant act of civil disobedience. A week later, the new fence was installed. It was everything Brenda had promised and more. An ugly, black, spear-topped monstrosity that seemed specifically designed to ward off both errant soccer balls and any lingering joy. It stretched along the entire length of the spillway, a stark declaration of HOA authority. The very sight of it made my teeth ache. I watched from my kitchen window as two burly contractors, looking bored and resigned, bolted the final sections into place. Brenda, naturally, was overseeing the operation. She wore a bright yellow reflective vest over her usual pastel polo, as if her presence wasn't already luminescent enough. She gestured with her clipboard, pointing out a slightly uneven bolt, probably demanding it be retightened to regulation torque. The contractors exchanged long-suffering glances. As I took my trash out later that afternoon, I deliberately walked past the new fence, giving it a scornful look. Brenda was still there, inspecting the fresh concrete around the fence posts. She caught my eye and gave me a slow, smug wave. The kind that says, "I told you so, and now you can't do a damn thing about it." "Looks secure, doesn't it, Mr. Miller?" she called out, her voice dripping with triumphant sweetness. "For the safety of the community, and to protect our property values, of course." I forced a tight smile. "It looks like a prison for garden gnomes, Brenda, but you do you." She just narrowed her eyes, then turned back to supervise the contractors, clearly dismissing me as a pathetic, defeated foe. But she had it all wrong. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd barricaded my access. What she didn't realize was that she had only escalated my resolve. My internal monologue, usually a torrent of sarcasm, was strangely calm. She had built a wall. Fine. I would simply go under it, like a very determined, slightly damp gopher. This wasn't just about kayaking anymore. This was a direct challenge to her petty empire. This was about proving that the spirit of adventure, even in the most mundane of suburbs, could not be contained by wrought iron and bureaucratic zeal. Tonight, Operation Subterranean Freedom would commence. The air was still and humid, a typical summer night in the suburbs. The streetlights cast long, faint shadows that danced with the rustling leaves of oak trees. It was the perfect cover for a covert operation. My garage was bathed in the harsh glow of a single bare bulb, illuminating my mission control, a tarp spread on the concrete floor, laden with my carefully selected gear. There was the new headlamp, strapped to a baseball cap, shining with a surprisingly powerful beam. The waterproof phone case, tested in the sink and seemingly impermeable. The coil of climbing rope, neatly tied. The knee pads promising comfort against unseen concrete. And finally, the wetsuit. Oh, the wetsuit. I'd ordered it online, naturally, selecting what I thought was my correct size. Turns out wetsuits are not like t-shirts. They are designed to be form-fitting. Very, very form-fitting. I wrestled myself into it, feeling like a sausage being squeezed into its casing. Every movement was a struggle, and the thick neoprene made me feel simultaneously invincible and utterly ridiculous. My arms felt like they belonged to someone else. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, trying to bend my knees without falling over. I look like a seal in a midlife crisis. But practicality won out. It would keep me warm in the inevitable chill of the underground pipes, and it would protect me from whatever else might be down there. I tried not to think too hard about the whatever else. I did a final gear check, running through the mental list. Granola bar, check. Water bottle, check. My trusty bright orange kayak, gleaming under the garage light, ready for its secret voyage. Check. Finally, with a deep breath, I pulled out my slightly leaky but mostly functional waterproofed phone and called Dave. It was 1:45 a.m. "You're actually doing it?" Dave's voice was thick with sleep and disbelief. "Affirmative," I whispered, feeling absurdly clandestine. "Operation Subterranean Freedom is a go. I'm entering the storm drain at 2 a.m. I should emerge in the lake in approximately 8 minutes. I tried to sound confident, but the wetsuit was constricting my diaphragm, making it hard to breathe normally. 8 minutes? Dave scoffed. Alex, you're going to get stuck. You're going to get some kind of rare sewer disease. You're going to be eaten by a radioactive turtle. This is the dumbest thing you have ever done. Your lack of faith is noted, Dave, I said, trying to inject some bravado into my voice. I'll send you a selfie from the lake. Victory selfie. Please do, he replied, a hint of genuine worry creeping into his voice, despite his sarcasm. It'll be great evidence for the inevitable lawsuit, or for your family to identify your remains. Cheery, as always, I muttered. Gotta go. The revolution awaits. I hung up before he could talk me out of it again. The moment of truth was here. My heart hammered against my ribs, a nervous drumbeat in the quiet night. The wetsuit was chafing in all the wrong places, and a faint odor of damp earth and something vaguely metallic seemed to already cling to me. This was it. The ultimate act of defiance against HOA tyranny. The storm drain grate was heavy, far heavier than I'd anticipated. I'd brought a crowbar, tucked discreetly under my arm. But even with the leverage, it was a beast. Rust flakes cascaded down onto the concrete as I pried it up, groaning with effort. The metallic shriek it emitted seemed to echo through the sleeping neighborhood, a sound that screamed, "Someone is doing something highly illegal and deeply foolish." I froze, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of cicadas and the distant bark of a dog. No concerned neighbors, no flashing police lights. Yet. With a final grunt, I managed to lift the grate enough to prop it open with a sturdy block of wood I'd brought along for just this purpose. A dark, cavernous opening yawned before me. It was even darker than I'd imagined, a pure, inky blackness that seemed to swallow the light from the street lamp. The air that wafted out was thick, damp, and carried a potent aroma of wet soil, decaying leaves, and something else. Something faintly industrial. "Okay," I whispered to myself, my voice a little shaky. "No turning back now." I carefully lowered my bright orange kayak into the opening. It slid surprisingly easily, its plastic hull scraping against the concrete edges with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. It disappeared into the blackness, a faint splash confirming it had hit the water below. Then it was my turn. I grabbed the edge of the opening, braced myself, and slid in feet first. The wetsuit made the descent surprisingly smooth, but the confined space was instantly claustrophobic. The smell hit me immediately, stronger now that I was fully immersed in its domain. It was less pristine concrete waterslide, and more wet raccoon graveyard with hints of old gym socks. Minor detail. A temporary olfactory inconvenience. I landed with a soft splash in the kayak. The water was shockingly cold, seeping instantly into the parts of my wetsuit that weren't quite so form-fitting. My headlamp, now fully engaged, cut a small, wavering circle through the oppressive darkness. The pipe was larger than I expected in some places, smaller in others, a patchwork of concrete sections. Water, about 6 inches deep, flowed slowly, carrying a surprising amount of debris. Leaves, twigs, plastic wrappers, and what I sincerely hoped was just a really large, oddly shaped rock. "The acoustics are interesting, though," I muttered, my voice echoing back at me. Every drip, every scrape of my paddle, every nervous breath seemed amplified in the subterranean chamber. It was like being inside a very smelly, very damp cathedral. I pushed off, using my hands against the concrete walls, and began my journey. The faint circle of light from the grate above me quickly receded, swallowed by the darkness. Soon, I was in total blackness, save for the beam of my headlamp. The sound of the outside world faded, replaced by the gurgle of water and the thumping of my own heart. This was it. I was in. And for the briefest, most exhilarating moment, I felt a thrill of defiant victory. Brenda and her fence were above ground, defeated. I was below, free. Or so I thought. The first minute was deceptively easy. I was moving, slowly but definitely moving. The current, gentle though it was, seemed to be doing most of the work, pulling me deeper into the concrete labyrinth. My headlamp beam, cutting a small circle in the oppressive darkness, revealed the smooth, curved walls of the pipe. It felt almost peaceful, in a grimy, damp sort of way. I even managed a smug little grin in the darkness. "Take that, Brenda," I thought, picturing her probably still dreaming of property values and color palette addendums. Then, the pipe narrowed. Not dramatically at first, just a subtle constriction that made the kayak brush against both sides simultaneously. I pulled my hands in, navigating by feel, using my forearms to push off the walls. The water level seemed to rise slightly with the narrowing, creating a more pronounced gurgle. The air grew heavier, cooler, carrying a new scent, something metallic like rust, and something else, earthy and damp. My map, the one I'd so confidently consulted on my laptop, had shown a relatively straight shot, maybe a gentle curve or two. What it had decidedly not shown was this, a sharp, unmapped, almost 90-degree turn. It appeared suddenly in my headlamp beam, a stark, unyielding wall of concrete blocking my path. "Oh, come on," I muttered, my voice echoing a little more frantically now. That was not on the schematic. The municipal map, it turned out, was more of an artistic interpretation than a precise architectural blueprint. I tried to angle the kayak, to steer it around the bend, but the narrowness of the pipe, coupled with the unexpected severity of the turn, made it impossible. The nose of my kayak scraped loudly against the concrete, sending shivers up my spine. This was less like a concrete water slide, and more like a concrete corkscrew designed by someone with a severe aversion to smooth transitions. And then there was the blockage. Not just a sharp turn, but a collection of branches, a tattered shopping bag, and what I sincerely hoped was a deflated basketball, all jammed together to form a small, disgusting dam. Fantastic, I sighed, the last vestiges of my self-assurance evaporating like mist. This is just fantastic. The kayak, with me still firmly inside it, wedged itself firmly against the impromptu dam at the sharp turn. The impact wasn't violent, but it was absolute. My forward momentum ceased with a sickening jolt. I tried to push off the walls, to wriggle, to apply any of the kayaking maneuvers I'd seen on YouTube, all of which were clearly designed for open water, not subterranean concrete tubes. Nothing. I was completely stuck. My feet were jammed against the front of the kayak, the plastic hull pinned against the rough concrete of the pipe. Every attempt to move only served to embed me more firmly. A cold dread began to creep in, far more chilling than the cold water seeping into my wetsuit. The darkness beyond my headlamp seemed to press in on me, suddenly far more menacing than mysterious. The sounds of the pipe, the gurgling water, the distant, indistinguishable drips became amplified, a sinister symphony of my own impending doom. Okay, I mumbled, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't panic, just assess the situation. The situation upon assessment was dire. My kayak was immovable. My legs were numb from being pressed against the hull. The air was getting thicker, less fresh. And my waterproof phone case, my ultimate lifeline, my selfie-sending beacon of triumph? I fumbled for it, pulling it from the pocket of my wetsuit. The clear plastic baggie, which had seemed so robust in my kitchen sink, now had a small, telltale rip near the seal. A tiny droplet of water gleamed on the phone screen. I tried to press the power button. Nothing. The screen flickered once, a pathetic little spark of life, and then died, taking with it all my hopes of calling Dave for an "I told you so" rescue. I was alone, in the dark, under my neighborhood, effectively bricked into a glorified sewer pipe. "This is it," I whispered, the words barely audible over the thumping of my heart. "This is how I die. Not in a blaze of glory, but wedged in a drainage pipe like a human hairball. My obituary would read, 'Local idiot, survived by his collection of useless gadgets and one very smug HOA president.'" The irony, even in my panic, was not lost on me. It was truly a humiliating end. My grandiose plan had dissolved into a sticky, smelly, claustrophobic nightmare. I just needed to figure out how to get out of it. And fast. Panic, when it truly sets in, isn't a slow build. It's a tidal wave. My rational brain, already on shaky ground, completely capsized. I started yelling. Not eloquent calls for help, but primal, guttural shouts. "Hello! Anyone, help me! I'm stuck!" My voice echoed uselessly, swallowed by the concrete tube, sounding small and pathetic. The air felt thin, heavy, and the stench of whatever was in the pipe seemed to intensify with every gasping breath. Time became meaningless. Was it minutes, hours, an eternity? I banged on the sides of the pipe with my fists, the dull thudding sound adding to the cacophony of my despair. My headlamp battery, of course, chose this moment to dim, casting long, dancing shadows that morphed into grotesque, menacing shapes. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my frantic breathing, trying to remember Dave's mocking voice, anything to distract from the creeping terror. And then a sound. Distant, muffled, but undeniably not from inside the pipe. Voices. Human voices. My eyes snapped open, and I strained to hear. Yes, definitely voices. Above me. I started yelling again, louder this time. a desperate, raw cry for help. "Here! I'm here! Down here!" The muffled sounds grew louder, closer. I heard a scraping, grinding noise, then a groan of tortured metal. The grate above me, the one I had so painstakingly pried open hours ago, was being lifted. A blindingly bright light, far more powerful than my dying headlamp, flooded the pipe from above. I squinted, my eyes watering, trying to make out the source. A man's face appeared in the opening, framed by a bright yellow helmet. His face was smudged with soot, and he wore a heavy, thick jacket. A firefighter. A genuine, honest-to-God firefighter. He looked down at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Sir," he called out, his voice echoing. "Are you kayaking in the storm drain?" My mouth was dry, and my throat was raw from yelling. I coughed, a pathetic, wheezing sound. "I was inspecting it," I managed to croak, trying to cling to some semblance of dignity, however flimsy. "For the city. It's structurally sound, mostly, except for the clog." The firefighter stared at me for another long moment, then turned his head, presumably to someone standing beside him. "Yeah, we got him," he said into his radio, his voice flat. "He says he's a volunteer inspector." A muffled snort came from off-camera. Within minutes, it was chaos. More firefighters arrived, a couple of police officers, and then the flashing lights, red and blue from a fire truck and 2 police cruisers, and amber from an ambulance. The entire scene was illuminated like a low-budget movie set. They used ropes and a specially designed winch to haul me and my utterly humiliated kayak out of the pipe. I emerged, not with triumph, but covered in slime, dripping with questionably clean water, and absolutely mortified. The worst part? Brenda. She was there, of course. Standing at the edge of the crowd, phone held high, recording my eternal shame for posterity. Her smirk was wider than the storm drain itself. The 3 minutes from my title felt like an eternity of public humiliation. To add insult to injury, the firefighters, for safety protocols, insisted on using one of their bright red inflatable rescue boats to transport me the mere 50 feet across the retention pond to the waiting ambulance. 50 feet. I could have practically swum it. But no, I was ceremoniously loaded into the rescue boat, still wrapped in my crinkling foil blanket, my orange kayak looking like a very damp, very defeated trophy in the background. The firefighter with the impressive mustache, the one from the opening scene, was my ferryman. His expression remained utterly unreadable. This was not a victory. This was an unmitigated, public, and hilariously disastrous failure. I was sitting on the back of the ambulance, wrapped in a fresh, much larger foil blanket, nursing a complimentary cup of lukewarm instant coffee. My wetsuit was peeled down to my waist, and I was trying to ignore the lingering smell of pipe that seemed to have permanently affixed itself to my skin. 2 police officers, Officer Jenkins and Officer Davis, were attempting to take my statement. Attempting, I stress, because they were both struggling and failing to remain professional. Officer Jenkins, a younger cop with a neatly trimmed mustache that seemed to be actively twitching with suppressed amusement, was writing diligently on his notepad. Officer Davis, older and with a weary but amused glint in his eye, leaned against the ambulance, arms crossed. "So," Officer Jenkins began, clearing his throat, "let me get this straight, Mr. Miller. You voluntarily entered that pipe with a kayak because the HOA put up a fence?" I took a sip of the truly terrible coffee. "It was a matter of principle, officer." Officer Davis snorted, a sound that he quickly tried to cover with a cough. "Right, principle. Did you find any Ninja Turtles down there, Mr. Miller? Maybe a Rat King who wanted to discuss property taxes?" "No, Officer Davis," I said, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. "But tell Public Works the turn at Elm Street Junction is a real clog hazard. and the pipe narrows significantly right after the first bend. The maps are misleading. Jenkins slowly looked up from his notepad, his eyes widening. You were mapping the pipe? I was merely observing its structural integrity and identifying potential flow obstructions, I replied, trying to sound as technical and official as possible. As a concerned citizen and a taxpayer, who funds these municipal services? Davis pushed off the ambulance. So, let me clarify. You decided to conduct a solo, unauthorized subterranean infrastructure inspection in a kayak at 2 a.m. because your HOA president wouldn't let you use a grassy slope. When you put it that way, I conceded, it sounds less brilliant than it did in my head, but my motivations were pure, unadulterated access to the lake, and a deep-seated philosophical opposition to arbitrary rules. Jenkins scratched something on his pad, then looked at Davis. I think we just need to issue a citation for misuse of municipal property, Davis, and maybe disturbing the peace due to the emergency response. Agreed, Davis said, shaking his head slowly. Though, honestly, Miller, this is the most excitement we've had on this shift in months. You probably saved us from another cat-in-a-tree call. He suppressed another chuckle. Just don't do it again, okay? Jenkins added, handing me a thin slip of paper. Next time file a complaint with the city. Or, just use the designated boat ramp. Duly noted, I mumbled, tucking the citation into my now dry, but still smelling of pipe, pocket. As they walked away, I overheard Davis say, I'm telling you, Jenkins, this guy's got a screw loose, but he's got heart. And he's going to be the best story at the station for weeks. I wasn't going to be arrested. I wasn't going to jail. I was just going to be a minor legend in the local police and fire departments and the star of Brenda's next HOA newsletter expose. And, I realized with a wry smile, probably the recipient of a very, very large bill from the city for emergency obstruction removal. My moment of subterranean freedom had come at a considerable price. 2 days after my ignominious rescue, my phone rang. It was the City of Alexandria Public Works Department. My heart sank. Here it was. The bill, the reckoning. I braced myself for the 6-figure invoice for emergency services, equipment deployment, and probably emotional distress compensation for first responders forced to deal with a grown man in a wetsuit in a storm drain. But the voice on the other end, a gruff but friendly man named Sal, sounded surprisingly cheerful. Mr. Miller, this is Sal with Public Works. Listen, we got your little report from the fire department, and the cops, and Mrs. Finch from the HOA. Quite the caper you pulled there. I assure you, it was a genuine attempt at… Yeah, infrastructure inspection, we heard. Sal cut me off, chuckling. Look, we're sending a crew out to take a look at that section of pipe you got stuck in. You want to be there? Might be interesting for you. Interesting? I repeated, confused. I'm assuming you're sending me a bill for this interesting development? Nah, don't worry about it for now, Sal said. Just come on down. Say around 10? So at 10 a.m., I found myself standing by the newly resecured storm drain grate. A fresh one, probably reinforced with titanium, next to a large mud-splattered public works truck. 2 burly contractors, Sal and another guy named Mitch, were peering into the pipe with professional disgust. Sal was a grizzly bear of a man with a booming laugh. Mitch was quieter, constantly chewing on a toothpick. Well, kid, Sal boomed, clapping me on the shoulder, which felt like being hit with a small tree. You're a moron, a grade A idiot for going in there. I take it you're not going to sugarcoat this, I said dryly. Nope. But, Sal paused, a strange glint in his eye. You're a lucky moron, a very, very lucky moron. Lucky how? I asked, eyeing the pipe with a fresh wave of nausea. The trauma alone should qualify for some kind of compensation, not to mention the smell that still follows me. Mitch, the quieter one, finally removed his toothpick and spoke, his voice surprisingly gentle. "This whole section of pipe has a structural flaw, Miller. That turn you got stuck on? It's been causing sinkholes over on Maple Avenue for months. Nothing major, just slow subsidence, but it was getting worse. We could never figure out the blockage point. Our cameras kept getting stuck right there." Sal nodded emphatically. "We knew there was a choke point, but couldn't pinpoint it without tearing up half the street. Your little kayak adventure gave us exactly the data we needed. Turns out the pipe wasn't designed for that sharp a turn, and a buildup of debris was slowly compromising the integrity of the concrete. You found it?" My jaw dropped. "So, I wasn't just being an idiot?" "Oh, you were definitely being an idiot," Sal corrected me, grinning. "But you were also like a very stupid, very smelly, human-powered probe. You probably saved the city $100 grand in exploratory digging. Potentially saved a few house foundations, too, if that blockage had gotten worse." "So the bill," I ventured, still processing this incredible twist of fate. Sal waved a dismissive hand. "Don't worry about the bill, kid. We'll call it a consulting fee for services rendered, though I think next time we'll just send down a drone." He winked. I stood there, dumbfounded. My idiotic, defiant, subterranean escapade hadn't just been a spectacular failure, it had been an accidental, albeit highly embarrassing, triumph. I was a hero. A slime-covered, slightly traumatized, inadvertent municipal hero. The emergency HOA meeting was called for Friday evening. Brenda, I could tell, was practically vibrating with anticipation. This was her moment, her chance to publicly crucify me, once and for all. I walked into the clubhouse, head held high, though still bracing myself for the inevitable barrage of reckless endangerment and damage to property values rhetoric. George gave me another sympathetic nod from the back. Brenda stood at the podium, her salmon-pink polo crisp, her hair immaculately coiffed. She cleared her throat, a prelude to what I knew would be a scathing, self-congratulatory speech. "Members of the association," she began, her voice already taking on that self-important cadence. "We are here tonight to discuss a grave matter. The recent, utterly irresponsible, and frankly dangerous actions of Mr. Alex Miller have exposed our community to untold liabilities and—" "Brenda, shut it!" A voice cut across her, firm and unexpected. It was George. He slowly rose from his chair, a crumpled piece of paper in his hand. The room fell silent. Brenda, visibly flustered, actually stopped mid-sentence. "George, really, this is neither the time nor the place for interruptions," she huffed, trying to regain control. "It is exactly the time, Brenda," George said, his voice surprisingly strong for an old man. "I received this letter today, from the City of Alexandria Public Works Department." He held up the crumpled paper. "It's a letter of commendation for Alex Miller." The room collectively gasped. Brenda's jaw actually dropped, a rare and beautiful sight. "It seems," George continued, reading from the letter, "that Mr. Miller's inspection identified a major infrastructure problem that was threatening the foundation of 3 houses in our community, including yours, Brenda. The city is thanking him for preventing what could have been a very costly and dangerous situation. They've also agreed to waive any and all associated costs, considering his actions, however unorthodox, to be a public service." The room buzzed with murmurs. Brenda stood frozen, her face a mask of utter disbelief and rage. Her grand moment of triumph had just been hijacked by a public works letter and an old man in a Hawaiian shirt. "Furthermore," George added, a sly twinkle in his eye, The city's repairs will include a small, city-approved lockable gate in the new fence for maintenance and emergency access. They even sent a key. He jingled a small, shiny key that glinted in the clubhouse lights. Brenda stared at him, speechless. The board members, seeing the sudden dramatic shift in public opinion, quickly moved to table any discussion of fines against me. In fact, a motion was quickly passed to officially commend Mr. Miller for his unforeseen civic contribution. I walked out of that meeting feeling a sense of vindication so profound it almost overshadowed the lingering smell of pipe. So, did I win? I don't know. I still smell faintly of pond scum, and my kayak has been impounded as evidence in a municipal investigation that I'm the star witness of. But every morning now, I walk down to the spillway, unlock my own personal little gate, and slide into the water. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see Brenda staring at me from her window, her face a thundercloud of impotent rage. And I give her a little wave. Because in the suburbs, victory isn't about winning the war, it's about being the reason they have to add a new subsection to the rule book, and maybe, just maybe, getting your own personal, exclusive gate to the lake.